Did liberty win the last election? Or was it a cult of Trump, like the Democrats say? Maybe it was a rejection of the elites trying to foist on us an unpopular word salad vice president who took both sides of every issue. Either way, those of us who love liberty, security, and values have our work cut out for us over the next 4 years. This is our opportunity to strike while the iron is hot. Join me in the Economic War Room, where we will speak with America's Constitution coach, Rick Green, the founder of Patriot Academy. Rick Green is a former Texas state representative. He's a national speaker, author, and radio host. Rick and his family travel the nation speaking on America's forgotten history and heroes with an emphasis on moral, religious, and constitutional heritage. Rick and David Barton co-host the national daily radio program Wall Builders Live. Rick is the author and executive producer of Constitution Alive, America's most engaging and entertaining study of the U.S. Constitution. Rick and his wife, Kara, founded Patriot Academy, an elite leadership training program specializing in applied civics with a biblical, historical, and constitutional foundation. Through their Constitution Coach program, they're training and empowering adults across the nation to educate their communities about the Constitution. Welcome, Rick, back to the Economic War Room.
Hey, Kevin. Always good to be with you, man. Thank you for having me back.
Rick, you're a personal hero of mine. You've been out there training people in the Constitution. That's something my father did. He died a year ago, and I think he helped save America the first time when we had Ronald Reagan elected. But here you are training coaches across the country to save America in modern times. You've just done a terrific job. Thank you so much for all you're doing there.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I love doing it, and you know, stumbled into it, to be honest with you. I love liberty, and I loved being a state rep and fighting for those things. And I didn't realize how important it was to actually teach people the playbook. You know, everybody wants to celebrate the touchdown, or they want to be part of scoring the touchdown, but they're not willing to learn about blocking and tackling and all of those things. And that's what we've got to teach the American people right now. What are the strategies that will get you across the goal line so you can score that touchdown in life? And that's what we're teaching with the Constitution now.
Well, within that last election, did we win or did we just avoid losing? I'm still not exactly certain where we are, the mandate that we have, and what we'll accomplish with it. What do you think?
Yeah, man, I think there were a lot of interesting factors this time. I mean, it was almost a perfect storm. The Democrats definitely had a lot of unforced errors. I mean, the whole way that they actually denied democracy, right? Because they didn't even follow the Constitution, and they didn't participate in the election itself of choosing who their nominee was going to be. It pushed all these people like RFK over to the Republicans. I mean, if you listen to his interview, for instance, the breaking point for him was not even when they wouldn't allow him to compete against Joe Biden and have debates and actually run in the Democrat Party. It was when she was unwilling to do the press conferences and the speeches and the debates and actually participate in the process. He said, we can't have somebody like this as president. So it pushed him over the edge. A lot of other factors, but that was what he said was the final straw. They did that in so many different areas that it brought a lot of people to the Republican side. And then, of course, you got, Kevin, the things that you and I talk about all the time, the bad economic policies that produced a lot of pain that caused people to vote against the current administration. And some level of people realizing the principles were being violated. I think there is a certain population out there that, man, they recognize that this clamping down on free speech, this inability for people to be able to speak freely when they disagree with you, this jailing of political opponents, I mean, those things have pushed a certain segment of our population to get involved that were not involved before. Not enough for the future, because that number combined with a normal candidate probably would not have won this election. That number combined with a once-in-a-generation candidate like Donald Trump was enough to win it, but it won't be enough in 4 years. So we have to increase the number of people that actually understand what's going on and are willing to fight for the principles of liberty.
Yeah, no question. Well, one of those people, Elon Musk, he saw what was happening. He was on the left. I mean, self-admitted, and just out being a tech entrepreneur like everybody else out in Silicon Valley. He woke up recognized the threat to liberty, moved to Texas, brought his companies to Texas, and attracted a lot of young people who see him as Tony Stark.
Yeah.
All right, so that's one
right.
movie analogy. Let me give you another movie analogy, or actually Star Trek. You ever watch any Star Trek?
Of course.
Well, I think of the left as the board.
Every time I pick up my phone these days, I feel like I'm Captain Kirk because I'm like, I'm doing things on this phone that he couldn't even do back there with the little flip. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, but I picture the left as the Borg, right? They've learned.
Yeah.
They learned that if high gas prices will cost you the presidency, so they unleashed the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, dumped all sorts of oil on the market, and pushed gas prices down despite the inflation. It was still too high. It still hit people's pocketbooks. But I think the next election, they're going to have butter subsidies and grocery subsidies or something, because they figured out that people voted their pocketbooks. How do we get people from voting their pocketbooks to voting their principles?
Yeah, man, it's I hate to sound so simple and cliche or boring, but I mean, education is critical. People have to understand what are the inputs that produce the good outputs. Most people in America tend to agree on what they want for the outputs. They all say, you know, I want freedom of choice. I want to raise my kids the way I want to raise my kids. I want a good job. I want economic prosperity, all these things. But they have no idea what the inputs are that produce that. And that's what has to be increased in America, is this understanding. We used to do that, right? The education system used to do that. I got a call today from a guy that was reading the 1828 Catechism on the Constitution, the Stanberry Catechism on the Constitution. And he was asking me about the Electoral College. And I said, you know, all those answers to that catechism, fourth graders knew that stuff 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and we don't know it as college graduates and lawyers and everything else. So we've got a real problem with the basically civic literacy. And I would argue, Kevin, every downstream problem in America, the negative outputs, is caused by the petri dish where bad government grows, is civic ignorance. When we don't know truth, when we don't know what the inputs are that produce a good society and a free society, we fall for the fluffy speeches and the subsidies that you're talking about that will be coming, just like we did during COVID. And so we've got to increase the knowledge, the civic literacy of America instead of civic ignorance. We want civic literacy. And if we can do that, we can solve this thing long term. But it's going to take a resurgence of falling in love with the principles of liberty. And the beauty is, I don't know if you saw this speech by Trump yesterday or day before, whenever it was he did this, but he's talking about the 250th birthday. You and I have talked about this. We have this window right now where we can have a resurgence of a love of the principles of liberty that are articulated in the Declaration and the Constitution leading up to the 250th birthday of the nation, which is July 4th, 2026. That's not that far out, but it's a window that we have to get people to understand what created the greatest nation in the history of the world.
Well, you know, history has shown that empires last about 250 years and they all fail. When we come back, we're going to take a break. But when we come back, I want to talk about Alexander Fraser Tytler and the cycle that the founders knew about and how we can avoid being sent to the dustbin of history. Do we protect liberty going forward? We'll cover that right after this break. In uncertain times, finding stability in the economy can feel challenging. But what if you could navigate economic volatility while honoring your biblical values? At Timothy Plan, they believe this balance is possible. Timothy Plan filters its volatility-weighted ETFs and family of mutual funds through a biblical pro-life and pro-family lens, so you can see competitive returns and moral responsibility, helping you to weather the economic storms. With Timothy Plan, align your investments with your values while adapting to our ever-changing culture. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has been recognized leader in biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, your bridge between faith, finances, and the future. Visit timothyplan.com or call 1-800-TIM-PLAN or 1-800-846-7526. Investing includes risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com.
Somewhere a perversion has taken place. Our natural unalienable rights are now considered to be a dispensation of government, and freedom has never been so fragile, so close to slipping from our grasp as it is at this moment.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It has to be fought for and defended by each generation.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
In this most critical time in our nation's history, now more than ever, Americans need to align with companies that support our constitutional rights and God-given freedoms. Patriot Mobile supports your values and provides exceptional 100% U.S.-based customer service. Join the movement today. Go to patriotmobile.com or call 972-PATRIOT.
We're talking with Rick Green, the Constitution Coach of America, and how do we educate the American populace to understand liberty, security, and values the way our founders did, not the way they're being taught in public schools, not the way they're being taught in woke law schools. I mean, Vice President Harris had her rally at Howard University, and she didn't show back up for that to give her concession speech, so they called her the Coward of Howard. That's kind of trending now. But Howard hasn't been teaching in law school the principles of the Constitution, but neither is Harvard, neither is, you've got to go to very far to find a good teaching of the Constitution at a law school. Rick, you went to the University of Texas. Did they teach you what the founders taught, or did they teach you something different?
They hit it, right? The last thing they wanted to do was actually open up the Constitution, so they had to tell you what some professor or some judge, says about the Constitution instead of actually reading it and studying it. So yeah, that's part of our problem, right? I mean, we're more worried about the fad and what's popular at the time instead of what's actually true, what actually lasts, what actually will be good for our kids and grandkids. But I think you mentioned it in the first segment. The pain of the bad policies is causing people to ask questions. They're starting to look up and go, you know what? I don't want to go into 1,000 years of darkness. I don't want to go into multiple generations of tough times. So what can we do to interrupt that cycle of nations? And you said it right there at the end, 250, man. That's when you normally fall apart. But we've got the keys, and they're right there in our founding documents to interrupt that cycle instead of having the tough times last for multiple generations.
Well, Alexander Fraser Tytler was writing at the time of Adam Smith, who wrote The Wealth of Nations, and the founders who wrote our Constitution. I'm reminded of something Kennedy purportedly said. He assembled all the smartest people in America, and he said, this is the finest collection of brain power ever assembled in the White House, except for the time when maybe Thomas Jefferson was dining alone. We ignore the fact that our founders had enormous wisdom when they wrote the Constitution, and they knew what Tytler was writing about. What he wrote about was basically straight from the period of Kings in the Bible, and that is, all great societies prosper. When they prosper, they get lazy. When they get lazy, they sell themselves into bondage, and then it's going to take a huge push back to get liberty back, and it's a 250-year cycle. Here we've got that choice. We're at that crossroads. What must America do at the 250th anniversary?
Yeah, and think about it, Kevin. It's really simple because it's honestly just the nature of man. When you have those blessings, life is good, man. You're enjoying the blessings of liberty. You're playing golf. Your business is doing great. You're coaching Little League. Everything's going wonderful, and you stop doing the hard work. So everybody's seen the memes that kind of summarize what you're talking about. Tough times make tough men make good times make soft men lead us into tough times. And the soft part, we're soft as a nation. We're snowflakes right now. We've had it. We're fat and happy. We've had it so good for so long. We stopped doing the hard work. And what do I mean by the hard work? Actually studying. Why was Thomas Jefferson so brilliant? Why was John Adams and George? Why could they talk about all of the greats? Why could they talk about all of the different periods of history? Because they had studied, they had done the hard work to get the intellectual ammunition to then not only win the war, but then create a nation that would produce such freedom and liberty for so many generations going forward. And of course, the greatest wisdom is the Bible. So why were they quoting the Bible 34% of the time? I mean, Montesquieu was about 8% of their quotes. Blackstone was about 8%. Locke was about 2.9%. But the Bible was 34% because that's where so much wisdom comes from. So what do? We got to get back to truth. We got to saturate ourselves with truth. We got to study the Bible, study the Constitution, study the Declaration, study the people that the Founding Fathers were studying, get that knowledge, and then go out there and build community with other people that want that, and then go tend the garden. Just do the hard work. And the hard work for us is nothing compared to the Founding Fathers. When I say hard work, man, I mean showing up at your school board and just sit in the back of the room and at least listen and learn how the process of governing that school works. show up at your city council and just sit in the back of the room and listen and learn how that process works, and then eventually start getting up and speaking into it, and maybe a year from now run for that office, or at least recruit somebody good to run for that office. I'm saying that's hard work, but it's really not that hard, man. We give a little bit of our life, a little bit of our fortune, a little bit of our sacred honor, and we can restore this thing.
Yeah, it's a couple of things. One is when you're investing, if you start early enough and invest small amounts over time, you have a nice retirement plan. But if it's 2 years till you retire, you're in panic mode. We can't get in panic mode again. And you talked about soft men. We've got a president, former president and president-elect, who took a bullet for us. I mean, he could have been on Turnberry playing golf every day, but instead he's done the hard work. Now we've got to follow in that. And the third thing I think about what you just said is I was taught early on, there's two ways to learn. We can learn from experience, which is very expensive and painful, or we can learn from other people's experience by studying and learning. And the Constitution, the founders, they studied the nature of humanity. They understood what people were, what they thought, how they acted. They saw tyranny, and they gave us a almost perfect. It's not perfect. It's not as perfect as the Bible, but it is almost perfect plan. And where it's got a little error or two, we can fix those in the United States Constitution. So
man, and no, sorry. I just I teach this at Patriot Academy to the kid when we have young people, 16 to 25-year-olds. We'll do state capitol events around the country, and I'll put them in the room and I'll say, hey, the zombie apocalypse has occurred. Everybody else is dead but us. We have to rebuild society. How would you do it? What would you do? What's going to be important to you to protect? What are the freedoms you want to protect? How would you set up government? How would you set up the system? Or no government? We just all have anarchy. And I let them think through that process, which is exactly what the founders did. I have a show called The Tavern. Why? Because in the taverns, they sat around and said, if we remade society, what would it look like? If we could learn from all the governments throughout history, what they did right, what they did wrong, what worked, what didn't work, how would we do it? And all of that culminated into the Constitution, the Declaration. And Kevin, every time, I've done it hundreds of times with these kids, every time, by the time they're done, within about 15 minutes, they have named freedom of speech, all the things that the Founding Fathers ended up doing. And then I put a picture on the screen of the Constitution. I say to the kids, I'm like, thankfully for you and for me, the Founding Fathers did exactly what we just did, and they put it in place. The problem is we've ignored it. We don't know it. We don't fight for it. We don't stand for it. We don't demand it of our elected officials. Now we have the opportunity to do that. We have a wonderful window of opportunity right now to convert millions of people to the principles of liberty, to get them saturated in truth, help them build community, and get them to tend the garden right there in their neighborhood. It can be done. It must be done. And actually, Kevin, I think it's going to be done. I am more optimistic now than I've been maybe my whole life. I'm seeing a wonderful, wonderful turning point in our nation's history right now.
Well, I can tell you the iron is hot. The crucible of America has been heated up very hot, and the iron is very difficult to shape unless it's hot. What does that mean? That means bring the hammer down. You strike while the iron is hot. This is our opportunity, like you said. We use another analogy. Goliath's been struck in the head. Now we've got to cut his head off, and we've got to chase the Philistines out of the land and kill the other giants. This is our moment. And it's our moment economically, it's our moment spiritually, it's our moment across the board. All right, we're going to need to take another break. When we come back, let's talk a little more about Patriot Academy and things we can do to make America great again.
Washington said paper money opens the door to every species of fraud and injustice. Jefferson said paper is poverty. Hamilton said to emit an unfunded paper as the sign of value ought not to continue a formal part of the Constitution. The founders hated paper money, so they put a pirate money clause in the Constitution for our state to use. Learn more at transactionalgold.com.
Here's a $10 bill. It's got the picture of Alexander Hamilton on the front of it. It's kind of sad. When I was 10 years old, everything that I could buy for $1 now costs about $10. That's the cost of inflation. It's just paper. It's not backed by anything. You can't exchange it for gold and silver. You used to, but you can't do that anymore. And that's unfortunate. Pirates wouldn't accept this. Pirates, they wanted gold and silver. Patriots, the founders of this nation, also wanted gold and silver coin. In fact, they put a provision in the Constitution, 17 words, that said states could only make gold and silver coins tender within the states. That's why I wrote this new book, Pirate Money, Discovering the Founders' Hidden Plan for Economic Justice and Defeating the Great Reset. It will explain exactly the history of money and exactly why gold and silver coins can be made modern with new technology and a useful monetary system. PirateMoneyBook.com. want to take a moment and share a personal story. A year ago, my father passed away. And I was there in his house when we got the call from the hospital. I was staying in his house, taking care of it, and we went over to see him. And it was a really tough time. It's been a tough year from that perspective. But my dad would be so proud of what's going on here. He spent his career, he was a stockbroker, but he spent his time teaching the United States Constitution in the Baptist and Methodist churches across Oklahoma. At Oral Roberts University, he went in and convinced a professor there to teach the Constitution the way the founders saw it, not the way that the people in the courts and others, the pundits, had said it was. And it changed the world. It really did. Michelle Bachmann was one of those students. I'm so proud of my dad. And I learned from him the Constitution. I learned from Milton Friedman in church. Free to Choose. They played the PBS episode Free to Choose. I learned economics. I owe so much to my dad. He brought me to faith and so much. So I take that personal privilege as I look at our guest today, Rick Green, who is America's Constitution coach. He's not only doing what my father did, he's trained up. How many coaches have you trained across the country, Rick?
We got 30,000 now, Kevin. We're standing on the shoulders of your dad, a giant, and the fortunate thing for us is that people are hungry for it. They actually want to learn these things, and so we're taking everything that you're talking about that your dad did in Oklahoma, and now we're doing it all across the nation. And the beauty is you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to spend, like your dad was a stockbroker. He wasn't an attorney. He wasn't a, constitutional expert. He just said, hey, I'm a citizen. I can study this. I can learn this. And then he studied it and he went out and he taught people all across the state. We're basically multiplying that all over the nation now.
Yeah, he did something very similar to what you're doing because he took National Center for Constitutional Studies videos from Dr. Cleon Skousen and he put the VHS tape in and he pressed it. But after doing 1,000 of those, he got pretty good at understanding the Constitution. And that's what you're doing. You have 30,000 Kerry Freemans across the country. That's right. I'm very optimistic for America, and it's you and it's Charlie Kirk, who we recently had in the Economic War Room, training young people. I mean, you guys are doing such terrific work. So you've got the opportunity to tell President Trump, tell the Congress, what must we do now? What are the priorities?
Yeah, before I go to what they should do, what we can do at home, and I can say this after about 10,000 of our classes taking place across the country and 1 million people going through them. What happens when you get people in your living room or at your church or wherever it's going to be, and you put those videos in, and your dad experienced this all those years, people watch that and they go, wow, I was lied to, or I didn't know that. And they have these aha moments, and then they want to do something with it. So it's not just educational. It's not just intellectual. They get that intellectual ammunition, but then they go out there and they fight the good fight. They go out there and get involved in their community. So it starts brush fires of liberty across the country. It absolutely works. I can say that with 100% certainty. Anybody at home can do this. Go sign up at patriotacademy.com and become a Constitution coach and host your first class. It can be 3 people in your living room or 300 people at your church. Doesn't matter. Just get started right now. As Kevin said earlier, the iron is hot, man. Let's strike right now.
Let me jump in here.
Yeah.
We talk about liberty, security, and values. We talk about 3 things you can do with your money. You can give it, you can spend it, or you can invest it. We're looking at an opportunity where you can give money to Patriot Academy and train Constitution coaches, which is going to make your economics even better because a free market economy is going to allow your business to grow and prosper. So that is a giving opportunity for the Economic War Room, and they can do that at patriotacademy.com. Is that right?
Absolutely, man. And it's a seed into liberty. That's what you're doing. You're investing in us so that we can go out there and train these coaches, train all these people. We give away our classes for free, but it costs us about $5 a person to do that with our technology and everything behind the scenes. So, if you give $1,000 to Patriot Academy, you're essentially training 200 new patriots across the nation. We're building a campus in Fredericksburg, Texas, a beautiful 178-acre campus, Independence Hall, all this cool stuff. And you actually get to come in and be a legislator for a few days. You get to learn the Constitution with other patriots from across the country. You can do a handgun defense class. You get all kinds of cool stuff. We call it the Patriot Experience. So check that out at patriotacademy.com. There's so much that people can do. Training up the next generation. I mean, we've been training these kids now for 20 years. We've got folks in Congress, in state legislatures, school boards, city councils across the nation.
Okay, let's
Kevin,
jump in right there. What would you tell those? What should their priority be?
At the local level or at the federal level?
All. All the above.
Well, I would say at the federal level, the beauty of this right now is these guys are actually talking about doing what guys like you and I have been talking about for years. I've never had so much hope that we could actually cut the federal government. You know, Ronald Reagan had 3 big goals: cut taxes, restore the military and patriotism, and cut spending. He accomplished the first 2, failed miserably at the third one. So there was 0 cutting of the spending. It actually, went way up. 0 cutting of the bureaucracies. We actually added them. A lot of mistakes on that front. No president has been able to do that. We have an opportunity right now for them to do that. If Elon Musk actually goes in with this Doge thing, with this Department of Government Efficiency, and he does what he did with Twitter, cut 80% of the employees and you'll be even more efficient. If they actually took the 400 and whatever agencies down to 99 agencies like he's talking about doing, imagine what that does to our economy. Imagine what it does to restore constitutional governance instead of this insanity we've got in Washington, D.C. So I say go in and do exactly what Elon's talking about. Donald Trump just laid out a wonderful game plan for reducing the Department of Justice and FBI authority and the things that they've been doing to persecute political opponents. There's so much that they're already on track to do. But I would say from a simple perspective, simply get back to the 17 things the Constitution says the federal government can do and get them out of everything else. Leave it to the states. FDA, CDC, all of these other agencies, none of that stuff is constitutional. Let the states do those things and let us as individuals be self-governing, and you will see an explosion of freedom and economic prosperity in this country like the world has never known before.
We've got that experiment going on between Brazil and Argentina, and I predict in 3 years, Brazil is going to be in terrible shape as a socialist nation, and Argentina will have come out of being a socialist nation and be prosperous because they're following constitutional principles. All right, so at the local level, you got 30 seconds. What do you tell your people that have gotten elected to state legislatures or whatever, and you better mention pirate money?
Yeah, and you have to press the gas. We have to take advantage of this opportunity, both at the federal level and at the state level. We've got to capture this this excitement and this momentum that's happening right now. So we've got to restore constitutional governance. We've got to get back to a limited government. We've got to protect those individual liberties. We've got to make sure that we have true free enterprise in this country. We can't do that without good money supply and actually having something that we can count on an honest weight and measure. So you and I were talking about this on another program. We've got about 20 states right now that are considering and working on legislation to actually pass transactional gold. We've got to get that done, Kevin, because we're going to suffer the consequences of the bad economic decisions of the previous 40 years, and getting transactional gold passed in this country in at least one state so that the rest of us can enjoy that. That's going to be how we hedge our bet against the negative consequences of the bad economic policy in the past. So people need to get in contact with their legislators. They need to start building relationships with those local leaders and then consider running for office in 2025 or 2026. That's how we're going to take this country back. We have a favor of the king. Now we got to go rebuild the walls.
We're going to summarize all this in our free economic battle plan at economicwarroom.com. Remember, what we see as a marketplace, our enemies view as a battle space. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room.